Acknowledge all our distinguished guests around it. But quickly, let me then bring in another former chief of staff under former President Mahama, Mr. Prosper Douglas Bani. A round of applause for him. You have 15 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers and all the partners for the invitation to participate in this forum with such distinguished panelists, Mr. Kujo Mpieni, former Chief of Staff, who preceded me as Chief of Staff in the Office of the President, my professor and political mentor, Kwame Hoy, and Professor Adai, who also worked as a colleague in UNDP, where I spent over 16 years of my professional life. Underpinning the establishment of the civil service of Ghana is the bureaucratic theory of Max Weber, which states, and I quote, "Bureaucracy is an organizational structure that is characterized by many rules, standardized processes, procedures, and requirements, number of desks, meticulous division of labor and responsibility, clear hierarchies, and professional, almost impersonal interaction between employees," unquote. On that note, the Ghana Civil Service is capable, efficient, and a professional service which has served this country over time. I'm not saying this because of my few years in government as Chief of Staff and Minister of Interior, but because I have worked in the service as a junior staff, at that time as an executive officer at the Ministry of Finance in 1978. I also taught at the Ghana Institute of Journalism from 1983 to 1994 when I became a director of studies at the Institute. And at that time, the Ghana Institute of Journalism was a department of the Ministry of Information. And we were all subjected then to the rules and regulations and conditions of service of the civil service. You can say now that I am an offshoot of the Ghana Civil Service, and I'm proud of it. Indeed, for 16 years, I served with the International Civil Service Organization, the United Nations. So from that perspective, I think I can assess the civil service as it relates to the execution of the president's policies and programs. Whilst working abroad, my main task was on development and crisis prevention and recovery. And indeed, there is no situation where without a civil service capacity, a state can survive. And indeed, at all moments of crisis, before a country re-establishes itself politically, economically, and socially, the first responsibility of we, the advisors, to ensure that we work with the nation to re-establish the civil service because of the unique role that the public administration plays between the government and the people who the civil service are expected to serve. Having listened to my senior colleague giving a narrative of the history of the civil service and how the service has performed, I can also say that the Ghana Civil Service have had its good times and also its bad times. Most of the time, the good times have coincided with the economic prospects of this country, when governments were able to provide resources to our distinguished civil servants to perform their duties. And as the earlier speaker alluded to, without proper training, without proper qualifications, there was no way you will enter the Ghana Civil Service. I had a colleague senior as well who told me that he was admitted, he applied to join the civil service. Soon after national service, he got his appointment letter, and before he could enter any ministry, he had to do the 3 months course at Gimpa. Before, there was not going to be any trial and error administration practice. So here we are, whilst government after government has castigated our civil servants, we must hold brave for what we own and what we have and what we have invested in over the years. From the time of Nkrumah to the current government, there is no opportunity, there is no situation where they can conclude that they cannot do or they can work without the civil servants. They cannot. They should not even try it. No government tried it, and it's not possible to work with the civil service as it's structured today, because the civil service plays an interface between the government and the delivery of service to our people. And that interface of bureaucratic expertise and professionals must be motivated, must be encouraged, must be trained to be able to perform those functions for our people. And if the politicians are in a hurry to provide the goodies for our people, they must then have a strong civil service to be able to deliver those functions. Indeed, from Kwame Nkrumah through the National Liberation Council and Buzia's regime, Liman's regime, PNDC, and then the democratic dispensations, there have been occasions where politicians, as we've heard time and time again, castigating these civil servants. But then the question is, are we clear in the rules between the civil servant and the politician? And occasions where there is the need, and it has always been the need, and there's always been action taken to fill gaps and vacuum created by the needs of government. So if you recall, Kwame Nkrumah had his own experts, and there are ministers working for him. If you take the situation of Prime Minister Buzia, he had the same experience. If you take Kutu Achampon, he had people working for him. If you take it, President Rawlings, he had people working for him. So the tendency of having people to support president and ministers to deliver their job is not new as well. However, where appointees from government begin to take the substantive positions of civil servants, then we have issues. If you want to be a civil servant, go through the civil servant programs. You need to be trained because their functions are sensitive, nervous, tricky, and dependent. So if you bring somebody for a short period to come and become director of a ministry with reference to the fundamental theory of Max Weber, which established the civil service of this country, we will be creating a situation where there will be significant dislocation between government and the people, delivery of service to the people. This, I think, should be something that we should bear in mind. Nevertheless, on certain occasions, we've had also crisis of responsibility between the political heads and the civil servants. In certain situations, we've had occasions where civil servants have become very powerful, particularly during the military regimes, where chief directors or directors became very powerful in their ministries that they dictated the policies, the way they were formulated, and its implementation processes. One situation in one ministry which I came across, there was this chief director or the head of the administration of the ministry who was introducing the commissioner who had been appointed by Kutu Achampon. And then the director said, to his staff, ladies and gentlemen, I am the head of this ministry. I am the head of this ministry. The commissioner is only responsible for political decisions. Everything else is me. No one had the right to interface between me and the political head, except through me. That was then. You can feel the power and the significance of the chief directors or the directors. On the flip side, you come to situations where ministers have become so powerful with several advisors and special assistants that they spend sleepless nights in the ministries trying to resolve formulation of policies and rearranging implementation capacities to get the goodies to their people. The civil servant at that time will stand and watch. And that is when the description of the civil servant cannot be trusted begins to gain credence. So we have all these dimensions, and research has indicated that we have this pendulum across our political history. However, there has been occasions where the civil servant and the political leadership have worked together. All these scenarios are possible. We need to select or work towards one that is acceptable to us. Having said that, and as my earlier speaker indicated, because of the sensitivity of the civil service and the desire of government to get their policies through, reforms of the civil service had occurred. Reviews upon reviews by experts have concluded that nothing, indeed nothing, has changed. Where are we going, ladies and gentlemen? We need to find a new path to the success story that we all desire. One of the experts indicated that and I quote, whether policy making is dominated by the bureaucrats or the political elite, or by a complementary effort of both parties, it is imperative to say that, considering the magnitude and enormity of the problems confronting the country, public policy making as an activity has become very significant in shaping the destiny of this country. Public policy making, the efficiency of that process is significant to whether we get the job done or whether we fail our people. While this is a quote from Mawuna Doche, whilst Doche in all his analysis points that the solution lies in vigorous training in public policy management, I will add that to achieve this optimal environment, we need to focus on some specific actions. From my experience, and fundamentally, we need to reverse to a situation where the president's cabinet secretary doubles up as what? The head of the civil service. Because the head of the civil service supervises all the chief directors. If you take a cabinet decision, which is a policy agreement, which is managed by the cabinet secretary, and after that, the cabinet secretary ceases to follow the policy that has been agreed upon through the civil service, it stops right there. The politician will come and take the document and take it to the ministry. There is no oversight from the presidency by the cabinet secretary to see that the civil service gets the policy really formulated, implemented, and referred back to the president. There's nothing like that at this moment. And I think that connection has to be made. While the head of the civil service is ranked as a minister, he is not presently the cabinet secretary. And that disconnect has to be addressed. We need to revert to our systematic training at GIMPA. And I would like to call on my senior chief of staff who was part of that process of dislocating that process. I think I disagree on him entirely. And I think that I want to ask the other experts to reinforce the fact that we need training at GIMPA on a regular. Indeed, GIMPA was established just to train civil servants and public servants after the Ms. Odwe and Oko Commission's report. That was why the GIMPA was established. Before it was the Institute of Public Administration. But because of the specific necessity to train civil servants, it was decided that we have GIMPA. And I think that we should fall back. All civil servants, without exception, must be trained. Presidential staffers and those appointed as ministers of state at the presidency must also shed away their prejudices about the civil service being ineffective and that they can take on the whole government machinery and get things run through the system. They will face real issues. Therefore, the staffers themselves will have to be reoriented on how government business is done. Advisors and special assistants must have the necessary professional pedigree to provide targeted inputs to their ministries and not to assume functions and responsibilities of civil servants. Otherwise, we will have what we listened to earlier on, so that the civil servants will have its space to do the work as they are expected to do. My last point on the staffers, special advisors, and other hangers-on around ministers and government appointees is that within the current the democratic opportunity for the president to make his or her appointments, we would also want to have staffers who are of high level doing the job of the president. How do we ensure that? Coming here, I thought about how one could ensure that, but I do not have the answers. What I'll propose, though, is that they must have some level of assessment. Thank you.